Welcome back to the Critical Edition podcast.
A bookish podcast where we explore literature and media and provide analysis through a critical lens.
We are your hosts,
Jasmine
and Soha. Today, we are going to be talking a bit about our 2025 reading. We're going to talk about what we read, what we liked, what we didn't like, what worked and didn't sort of work for us. And then we're going to talk about our 2026 reading goals. I'm sure many of you are doing somewhat similar things in the beginning of the new year, so we thought we'd share some of these things with you too. Without further ado, Jasmine, tell me, how was 2025 as a reading year for you?
2025, I had some really high highs and some really low lows in terms of reading. But also
in general.
but also in general. There was a lot of things that was happening this past year that I liked, and I found a lot of things that used to work for me in the past didn't work for me anymore, and I have new intentions going into this new year, and hopefully it will make this reading year more successful, more fun, more reflective, and just a better time in general.
Yeah, so it sounds like your reading year in 2025 was somewhat mixed. Did you find that what you did end up reading you mostly enjoyed, or did you not really enjoy some of the books that you read?
This was the year of the DNF.
Okay.
This
Yes.
was the year of the DNF, and I usually have no shame about not finishing a book I didn't like. I could be 90% of the way through, and then a feeling would overcome me, and it'd be, what am I doing here? I hated every minute that I have already invested into this book, and I will just close it and never look at it again. I think most of the DNFs that I experienced this year were just really bad recommendations, and I'm looking now more closely at who's recommending me, where I get those recommendations. I really regretted not cataloging my reading. Not just last year, but I guess my whole life. I've never really cataloged or written down the books that I've finished and read. I tried to do it last year. I think I logged 2 books and then I stopped. And I and I would also like to log books that I DNF'd just so I can have those at the forefront of my mind when I am picking a new book.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like cataloging your books is something that you haven't consistently, like a practice you've been able to consistently do. And I wonder, what are some barriers for you cataloging what you have read?
I don't know why I've been so resistant to it. I look at your Goodreads and I'm always inspired so hard. And I look at other people's storyboards or Goodreads and I'm just like, wow, I learned so much about them and I love that it's such a great sharing moment. And I guess I've never been one to even privately want to share what I did and did not read, how I felt or did not feel about a book. But it's changing this year. I would like to be more, when I close a book, I would like to have more of that reflective moment and kind of write down not just the period in which I read it, but also the context in which I read a particular book or novel, what's going on in the world, in my life, why I even decided to pick it up. It just feels so permanent having a written record of it. And I think that intimidates me a little bit, even if I'm not sharing it with anybody.
Yeah, I used to only catalog novels that I read. Like if I read a graphic novel or if I read even short stories or a short story collection, I just wouldn't really put that on my that's something I'd like to change. And that's kind of reflective in my 2025 reading, like the things that I documented, because I did actually document short story collections and graphic novels this year, which what really inspired me to start cataloging them finally is I read a graphic novel that I felt really strongly about and really liked, and I wanted to remember that I had read that so I can go back and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to create more of like that paper trail for myself,
Mm-hmm.
to look back on. And for the past couple years, I've been pretty consistent in documenting at least the novels that I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really enjoyable to look back and be like, oh, okay, in 2022, whoa, God, it's been so long since I read that book, but it's really still impactful and I think about it a lot. And yeah, I enjoy being able to have that experience. But yeah, for my reading this year, I had a pretty, I would say pretty okay reading year. I think I read a little bit more than I usually do, including those graphic novels. I don't think that I'm like the fastest reader. Some people read like 70 to 100 books a year, which is so cool, but I can't, not me. I don't think I can do that. It's like I can't read that fast. Um, but yeah, I had a pretty mixed reading year as well. There were definitely some 1-star reads, but a couple of 5-star reads that I think will like absolutely stick with me. So I'm really excited to talk more about all the books that I read. But okay, Jasmine, do you have sort of a ballpark estimate of how many books you read or completed or DNF'd?
So I think I read front to back maybe around. Oh, this is where it gets tricky. I will have like reading frenzies where I read, for example, I read all the Bridgerton books in a span of like 3 days.
Yeah, you do that.
I do that, and I will have those moments frequently throughout the year, but I don't necessarily catalog them as like one book. That's just one reading session.
Well, I'll also say that when I know that you're having one of these reading frenzies, I look on your Goodreads and I'm like, where are they? What have you been reading? I want to know.
I
And you
know.
never update it.
I
And I always want you to update it. So,
know. It will change. I'm making it. I'm saying this out loud. It's just my intention. I will
mhm.
log these reading frenzies because I think it's also really interesting to see these like really short sprints of like why was I doing that? Why was I spending like a period of like 24 to 36 hours where I like hardly stopped to eat just to finish? I don't know. Uh, and you know what's so funny is in the case with that Bridgerton frenzy, it's so hazy to me. Like I could not tell you what was going on in my life, and I couldn't even tell you like where one book started and the other ended. Like I just in the moment, if I had written down, just even taken 5 minutes after in between each book, it could have been so much clearer.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I think if I were to ballpark it, I would say I read about front to back, maybe around 20 books, give or take, and I
Mhm.
DNF'd maybe double that.
Wow.
And
DNF queen
I
over
know.
here. Love that. That's where we really differ. Like I never DNF books. Like if I pick a book up and I read even like 20 pages, like I'm pretty locked in. I'm like I have to finish even if I find it excruciating. And maybe that's something I can change this year. I think this year, okay, here's what I'll say. If I read the library sample amount,
Hmm.
that I don't, and I stop reading after that, I don't consider that DNFing. I
Hmm.
consider that just testing out a book. If I read a little bit more than that, I'm going to finish the book. Like I'm going to push myself to finish that book. But I probably DNF'd like, I probably read the sample of like, probably like 10 books or so. And then I probably maybe like read a little bit further and then DNF'd like maybe one
That's
this year.
really actually,
Maybe.
wait, Soha, that's actually so admirable because my
I
goal
don't know
is,
because I don't know about that because I have some books on my list from 2025 that I just hated every page of. And I just don't know why I keep doing it. Like, I just should have stopped. I don't, yeah. I think it's admirable to say that's not for me anymore.
I think for me, it's not necessarily like something that I go about. When I DNF a book, I'm what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to compare like how long will this book take me to finish and
Mm-hmm.
the precious little free time that I feel like I have, and do I want to spend that time reading this awful book that I'm 2 chapters in and I find excruciating. I think there's something to be said about like persevering through a book that is like deeply uncomfortable or deeply unsatisfying. But for me, I'm at this point in my life, I'm just trying to get through the week.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
can't get through the week if I'm slogging through all these other things going on in my life and also slogging through this book that I'm reading in my free time.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
But
absolutely.
but I'd like to change that because I know like 2 chapters, 3 chapters, even like 10 chapters in, you're not really getting like the full breadth of a book or novel. You're just like barely testing the waters, and maybe it's unfair of me to quit so easily. But I am a quitter, so.
I think that there is something to be said to like sometimes persevere through a difficult book to see what you might be able to gain from it or might be able to enjoy from it. But the books that I pushed through, like I easily I should have stopped actually reading them. They suck, and I don't like. I wish that I hadn't spent that time reading those books. But okay. I think I read probably around total. I finished 18 books, so I think we're like in a similar ballpark of what we finished reading this year, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
But let's get into the books that we want to talk about and share. I think that I have mine like loosely chronological, but then
Mhm.
also I separated the novels and graphic novels, so like not fully chronological. Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about each one of these titles I read,
Mhm.
but why don't you start us off with a title or two, and then we'll get back to mine.
Yeah, so I have only really listed down 6 books that I thought were worth kind of sharing, but also that I have stayed with me through the end of the year. The first book I'll talk about was not my first read of 2025, but I think it's an excellent read to start in the beginning of the year. It's called Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico. It was first published in 2022 in Italian, was translated recently in March of 2025, and it was also shortlisted for the 2025 Booker Prize. So
Hmm.
I'm just gonna
Wow.
give, yeah, I know. I'm just gonna give you the Goodreads summary and then I'll share my thoughts. Millennial expat couple Anna and Tom are living the dream in Berlin in a bright plant filled apartment in Neukölln. They are young digital creatives, freelancers without too many constraints. They have a passion for food, progressive politics, experimentation, and Berlin's 24-hour party scene. Their ideal existence is also that of an entire generation lived out on Instagram, but outside the images they create for themselves, dissatisfaction and ennui burgeon. Their work as graphic designers become repetitive. Friends move back home, have children, grow up. An attempt at political activism during the refugee crisis proves fruitless, and in that picture perfect life, Anna and Tom feel increasingly trapped, yearning for an authenticity and a sense of purpose that seem perennially just out of their grasp. So I think the reason why I wanted to start with this book in the new year is because it's only 137 pages.
Mm-hmm.
A
Yeah.
short book I feel like will start your reading year off to a great start. And also because I think that Following Anna and Tom's story, it kind of makes you reflective about your own online behaviors and the cultures that permeate
Mm.
past like the screen. Anna and Tom, they're pretty typical freelance digital nomad people, and they've built like their whole entire life around like aesthetics, creativity, and they're so carefully curated online presence. Like, I think that's something a lot of us see and can relate to. But I think what this book does really well is that, it kind of makes their lifestyle at first seem ideal, but you slowly start to feel like the emptiness and how their days blur together, how their like creative work kind of loses meaning, and how their attempts, these different attempts to feel engaged, end up feeling repetitive. There's a joke in the book that I thought was hilarious. Like, no matter where they go, they keep encountering the same brand of oat milk, and and is this not what the algorithm is like constantly feeding you every day? Or at least it is for me.
Mm.
I can't speak for everybody. But like but like reading this book, you can kind of see where the author is like quietly critiquing this like modern globalized culture, especially in like the, what do they call it, the creative class, and the way internet culture and consumerism like flatten everything into like a very similar homogenized experience. And that's always something that I like to contend with in the beginning of the year, because I always have these big grand goals about how I'm going to
Mm.
cut back on my internet consumption, my social media consumption. I have these lofty goals that inevitably fail about how much time I'm going to spend on a certain app or two. I think underneath all of what this book is about is like, it makes you reflect on the values you want to live your life by, and the values that will actually sustain you beyond like that superficial thing you
Mm-hmm.
see posted everywhere on all these social media platforms.
Mm. Yeah, really interesting. I'd never heard of this book actually. Yeah, really cool. It also sounds like it's like this realistic fiction, you know? And there's a way that sometimes that can feel anxiety provoking
Oh,
too, but like in like a
absolutely.
slow burn, like kind of way where it's just like, oh, yeah.
The writing in this is like very, I remember it being very like detached and observant.
Yeah.
And it focuses on
Mm-hmm.
like the minutia of like the everyday, like their daily routines, and that actually does kind of like make your skin crawl a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I can totally see that.
Yeah. I think thinking back about this for the year 2026, I'm again making these lofty social media resolutions and goals. I like think I've been thinking about this book in particular a lot. I wish I had more of my initial thoughts written down so I could kind of contend with it more, but that was a really memorable read, I think, for me.
How many stars would you give it?
Oh, a solid 4 out of 5, I think. I think the shortness, like the of the novel, it's like 130 pages ish. For me, I remember it being like a very short afternoon read. For the impact that it had out of that one afternoon, I think it was pretty good. Did you have any similar reads or any like reads that made you contend with in the beginning of the year?
My first read of the year was, I would say, incredibly different than the one you shared. I read My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the author who wrote Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had always wanted to read Rebecca, but for some reason I decided to read My Cousin Rachel instead. I don't know. And funnily enough, the first book I'm reading this year in 2026 is Rebecca. I'm reading Rebecca right now.
Oh my
So
god.
it's kind of funny how that all happened. But
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm starting out with Daphne du Maurier every every year. But yeah, My Cousin Rachel, I didn't like very much. I don't know. The concept was kind of interesting, I suppose, but it was it just dragged on a bit. I don't remember how long it was. It's like Rebecca's, I think, 400 and something pages. I think My Cousin Rachel is something similar. So to me, that's kind of like a longer end book, like that. I would prefer reading books that are like a little bit shorter than that. But it just feels like the middle section is sort of slogging along. And I'm about halfway through Rebecca now, and I think I'm hitting like a spot where I'm like, ugh, okay. And I definitely had that with my cousin Rachel too. I got halfway through the book and I was just ready for it to be over. I kind of predicted what was going to happen. She writes these sort of gothic, atmospheric novels, and this one's most gothic element is kind of about like poisoning. So that's kind of, interesting enough.
Very
But
interesting.
I guess it's like winter, you know, I guess I kind of am attracted to this like gothic type of book in December, January. But I actually gave this a 1 star.
Oh my god.
Which is wild, but I don't know. That's what I said. That's what I said back then, I suppose. So 1 star. I followed this up with a very, very short book. This is a Japanese translated book called Sweet Bean Paste. And I was actually at the library last week looking at DVDs because we all should watch DVDs from the library. That's a good way to consume media.
Oh yeah.
But I saw that this was adapted into a movie.
Oh my god.
I had no idea. Yeah, no idea. It was in the Japanese language section of the films, and I was like, what? I read that. Well, I listened to this on audiobook, actually, when I was traveling to Japan.
Amazing.
It's kind of just like a sweet sort of novel, pretty short, about a man who makes dorayaki and a child and an older woman and how their lives intersect a little bit. It was fine. I gave it a 2 star.
Oh my goodness. It kind of sounds like your reading year was a very slow start. Or like in terms of how much you enjoyed them.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. The next one was I enjoyed a lot more. This is a short story collection by Jhumpa Lahiri called Unaccustomed Earth, and I gave this a 4 star. I enjoyed it. I hadn't read something new by Jhumpa Lahiri in quite a while. And she writes these really great short stories. They're usually about some New England, South Asian family or individual and their relationship and lives and immigration stories and, that kind of stuff, which I really enjoy. So 4 stars for that. But okay, that's kind of like my first set of books in the beginning of the year. But tell me your next one.
I might have read this before Perfection, but it's Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad. It was first published in 2023 and it was shortlisted for the 2024 Women's Prize for Fiction. And I picked this book up because I wanted to read more fiction in relation to Palestine. I think I had the year previous read a lot of nonfiction like Edward Said, Noam Chomsky, or Rashid Khalidi about Palestine, but I wanted to intentionally engage in like art and literature about Palestine because I think it's a different way of consuming like media. Goodreads says as follows: after years away from her family's homeland and reeling from a disastrous love affair, actress Sonia Nasir returns to Haifa to visit her older sister Haneen. This is her first trip back since the Second Intifada and the deaths of their grandparents. While Haneen made a life here, commuting to Tel Aviv to teach at the university, Sonia stayed in London to focus on her acting career and now dissolute marriage. On her return, she finds her relationship to Palestine is fragile, both bone deep and new. At Haneen's, Sonia meets the charismatic and candid Mariam, a local director, and finds herself roped into a production of Hamlet in the West Bank. Sonia is soon rehearsing Gertrude's lines in classical Arabic and spending more time in Ramallah than in Haifa, along with a dedicated group of men from all over historic Palestine who, in spite of competing egos and priorities, each want to bring Shakespeare to that side of the wall. As opening night draws closer, it becomes clear just how many violent obstacles stand before a troupe of Palestinian actors. Amidst it all, the life Sonia once knew starts to give way to the daunting, exhilarating possibility of finding a new self in her ancestral home. I really liked this book. I think this was like a 5 out of 5 star read for me. I really like books. I think maybe in our last casual episode you can tell that we both really like books that kind of blend the personal and the political. And this book in particular focuses on themes of like diaspora and displacement and these fragile and complicated family relationships that are like bound together through like a shared history or a shared struggle and a shared resistance. I really liked this book because there's like this emphasis on how art plays a big role in the story, especially as a way of like pushing back against oppression. I should note though that this book was published in 2024, but it was written before October 7th. But the novel feels like especially relevant given the ongoing and escalating violence in the occupied like Palestinian territories. The novel also digs into not just like the logistical and practical challenges of making art under occupation, it also deals with like the moral challenges of making art under occupation as well. Everything from like questions about like how to find money to fund this project, questions of responsibility and representation and all these things, and the Hamlet production that they're trying to put on becomes a way to like think through bigger questions about like power and betrayal and like who gets to tell whose stories. It raises like questions like who, if anyone, represents Palestine in Hamlet. Is Israel meant to be Claudius, and how does Gertrude fit into this equation as someone who is like widowed and then marries Claudius? And like once the play is staged, like those parallels feel really obvious, but there's still like plenty of room for interpretations, which is nice. I will say though, the ending is like, whoa, the ending was like really intense and unexpected, but I should have seen it, and I won't give anything away, but it there's like this building tension in like the occupied Western Palestinian territories that kind of make the ending feel so unexpectedly expected. I won't spoil it, but please read it. It was really good, and yes, I did do a reread of Hamlet after this book, my annual Hamlet reread. But it was a really good read. Both Enter Ghost and Hamlet.
That is so cool. Yeah. And speaking of personal and political writing, the next book that I read was by Toni Morrison, and it was Sula, which I think is like a book that you really, really like. And this had been on my TBR for a very long time, and I'm glad that I finally was able to read it. I think I had read a part of it in 2024 and then like put it down and then came back to it in 2025. Yeah, it follows the story of like two friends who are Black women contesting with racism and their identities and their friendship with one another. And it's obviously Toni Morrison is like a really poetic and lyrical writer, so I enjoyed that. There was like language that I'd really never seen in the context in which she was using it, which I appreciated. And also I thought that there were parts of it where were like sometimes challenging to like fully maybe like visualize or like grasp for me. And I think for that reason, I gave it's like a 3-ish star. But I think overall, it's been like an impactful read. Like I think about how she wrote these 2 characters and the setting and how memorable it is. So yeah. And then also, speaking of personal political sort of writing, the book I read after that, I think that you might have bought me this book actually.
Oh my god.
On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous
Oh my
by
god.
Ocean Vyung. Yeah, so that's also another book that I read a portion of, put down, like came back to later. And this one is like in the format of almost like a letter to like the narrator's mom who doesn't like read English, but it's like a letter to her. And I think that format is really indicative of like all of the themes in the book. It's like what this individual knows about himself, yet like can't be known by his family or his mom. And yeah, it's like a queer, semi-autobiographical work, which I think is really, it was good. There were moments where I was like, I could see this as a Tumblr quote in 2014. But overall, I enjoyed it. And I also gave that about a 3 stars. And then I read a book, which I'll talk about later, so it won't be like exactly chronological, but I feel like this book fits really well into the personal political category because it's a memoir, and I don't typically read a lot of memoirs, but this one had been on my list for a while, and it's none other than Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Oh my god, I loved this book. I loved it. This is a 5-star read for me.
Oh my
It had
gosh.
been on my list. Yeah, it had been on my list for so long, and I'm not someone who typically gets like teary-eyed or like that type of emotional while I'm reading. Like I can be very moved internally, but like literally like tears forming is tough when I'm reading. And this is a book where like literal, like I got watery-eyed. Like that is how impactful this book felt. This is a book about it's about Michelle and her relationship with her mom, her Korean mom, and it's about kind of like her mom's health declining and then her mom passing away. And it's just, if you have an Asian mom, you should read this book because it's so emotional and visceral and heartfelt and painful, and it speaks so well about her own identity as like a mixed race person. It's just so good. I really enjoyed this one. But yeah, as you can tell from our previous episodes, this is a genre that we both really enjoy. Yeah, tell me about your next read.
My next read, I read this book because there was a lot of noise on various media publications, on various social media publications. But
Can I guess what it is?
Yes.
Is it Intermezzo?
No. I did read Intermezzo. It's not on the list of books I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
But, fuck.
Okay,
I should have put it on.
Did you like that book?
That was a book that I felt like I should have DNF'd, but I slogged through it, and I'm glad I did, which kind of makes me feel like I should not DNF as many books as I do.
Very interesting. Okay. I derailed it, but keep going.
But it's, the book I'm talking about is Stoner by John Williams. I feel like if I showed you the cover, you'd be like, that book.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, wait, let me see.
Should I look up the cover?
Wait, let me see if I can.
Here, I'll look it up while you talk about it.
Okay. But this book was first published in 1965, and it has since had a renaissance since its republication by NYRB in 2013. The synopsis from Goodreads reads that William Stoner is born at the end of the 19th century into a dirt poor Missouri farming family. Sent to the state university to study agronomy, he instead falls in love with English literature and embraces a scholar's life, so different from the hardscrabble existence he has known. And yet, as the years pass, Stoner encounters a succession of disappointments. Marriage into a proper family estranges him from his parents. His career is stymied. His wife and daughter turn coldly away from him. A transforming experience of new love ends under threat of scandal. Driven ever deeper within himself, Stoner rediscovers the stoic silence of his forebears and confronts an essential solitude. That sounds like so pretentious as fuck. And
the cover is too kind of this very pensive white man looking down. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like, why book influencers that I generally liked their recommendations? I was like, why are they recommending me this book? At first I thought it was like, I don't know, some paid media program, whatever. And I was like, wait, he's dead. That's not, or no, the author may not. I actually don't know if the author is dead or alive. But it was not.
He's dead.
He's dead. I was like, okay. So safe to say that I was really skeptical going into it, especially seeing how it seemed to explode all over the internet. But I will say it was actually good. Like I
okay. Wow. Love that.
I was wrong. It was really good. It was really well told. It was deeply moving and richly written.
Oh.
And I think what I really liked about it is that there's like a quiet honesty in this surprisingly emotional book that's also not trying too hard. And I think that at the very surface level, like it's about this very ordinary white man with a pretty uneventful life, which is exactly the point. He's not famous or rich or especially happy, and I think that's what makes this white man's story feel personable and relatable. He has so many disappointments, he makes all these compromises, but also has these victories, these really minute victories, and it's these small moments that makes this book feel like meaningful. And I think that the writing plays a big role because like John Williams' style, I remember it being very simple and restrained. Like it doesn't tell you how to feel. He just kind of lays out Stoner's life and lets like the sadness and the frustration speak for themselves. And there's like this understated emotional turmoil that kind of stays with you, and it pushes back against the idea that a life has to be lived like exceptionally to matter. And it suggests that like dignity and purpose can exist in a life that looks very ordinary from the outside. And that was really intriguing to me. I mean, there's not much that I can say that hasn't already been told or extolled by so many other people. But I will say that every year I try to get at least like one campus novel. And in that niche, I think this is actually excellent. Surprisingly.
Wow. Maybe I'll have to look into this book. I could too use a campus novel soon. So, speaking of white men that are likable, the next book I read was Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain.
Oh my god.
Goodness.
That's the epitome of likable white man.
Isn't it? Isn't it? Yes. R.I.P. Anthony Bourdain. I listened to some of this on audio, and he narrates it himself, which phenomenal.
Oh my god.
Just so good. Incredible. And yeah, it just talks about his career, kind of like how he came into the restaurant biz, and it's pretty fun. It's really personable and easy to relate to. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 star. The next book, though, I want to talk about is a book that I so wish that I DNF'd.
Oh,
Like, this is a long book and a book that was me trying to read outside of the genres that I typically enjoy reading.
mm-hmm.
And didn't work for me. It's A Discovery of Witches
Oh!
by Deborah Harkness. Jasmine, why did I read this whole book? I don't know. It's so long. Like, it's huge for no reason.
You know, I did not read that book, but I watched the entirety of that show, and I had the urge to DNF it, like, after every single episode, but I couldn't.
Yeah. You know what's funny
Mhm.
is I watched a bit of the first season of the show and I did stop watching it. But then why did I read this book? I haven't, like, I couldn't tell you. I don't know what was going on. I think every once in a while I get this urge to read outside of the genres that I typically read. And for me, that's kind of like A Discovery of Witches, or like a romance, like a, something that feels lighter and fun and not as heavy. And maybe the prose isn't like, maybe it's like more accessible, something that just feels easier to read. But every time I feel like, why did I read that? Why did I spend the time reading that? Because I think that that's just like entertainment, which is great. And I feel, I read for entertainment, but it just, something about this book and like the surrounding genres just feel like really difficult for me to get into. But typically, like, I love watching TV, like shows and movies that are like that. So I don't know. I just wish I put this down. I think I just wanted something that felt easy. And I think that I found later in the year that graphic novels fill that in a better way for me, because I actually enjoy the graphic novels. They feel really easy. There's like the visual element to it as well. So I think maybe that's what I'll do instead of trying to like read a Discovery of Witches-esque book. But on the surface, it's like things that I would really like. It's like, oh, it's very like, what, she's like a researcher at a English university, and she meets a vampire, and there's witches, and it's all this like fun kind of stuff. But it just really, I couldn't I didn't like it. But then I was like, oh, I'm already so far into it, I might as well keep going. And I told myself that every time I read it, and that's how I got to the very end. I gave it a 1 star. I would give it a 0 if I could. I can. A 0.
Yes, you can.
I can't on Goodreads. Yeah, exactly. I can here. Yes, but let me tell you about a book that I read after that was phenomenal, incredible, and I also made you read, which is none other than My Dark Vanessa by
God.
Kate Elizabeth Russell.
Yes.
5 stars. So good. So this had some internet hype around it, and that's why I was kind of like, I don't know. So glad that I read it.
Oh, I'm so glad you made me read it.
Yeah. Yeah. This was good.
Oh, it was amazing.
Is this one on your list as well?
This is on my list.
Okay, let's both talk about it then.
Okay.
Why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown?
Yeah, I'll read you the Goodreads summary.
Yes.
2000. Bright, ambitious, and yearning for adulthood, 15-year-old Vanessa Y becomes entangled in an affair with Jacob Strain, her magnetic and guileful 42-year-old English teacher. 2017. Amid the rising wave of allegations against powerful men, a reckoning is coming due. Strain has been accused of sexual abuse by a former student who reaches out to Vanessa. And now, Vanessa suddenly finds herself facing an impossible choice: remain silent, firm in the belief that her teenage self willingly engaged in this relationship, or redefine herself and the events of her past. But how can Vanessa reject her first love, the man who fundamentally transformed her and has been a persistent presence in her life? Is it possible that the man she loved as a teenager and who professed to worship only her may be far different from what she always believed? Alternating between Vanessa's present and her past, My Dark Vanessa juxtaposes memory and trauma with the breathless excitement of a teenage girl discovering the power her own body can wield. Thought provoking and impossible to put down, this is a masterful portrayal of troubled adolescence and its repercussions that raises vital questions about agency, consent, complicity, and victimhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it really lived up
Oh, it did.
to all those things. It really did.
It really
It was
did.
so good. It was really moving. It was unexpected. It's such delicate material to write about in a way that feels honest, but also, what's the word? Not in like this flashy kind of, what's the word? Like it just feels true, and it feels honest, and it feels like the material is so delicate, and it so easily could have been a book that did the things that all these other books might do, which is like sexualizing and, like it's overly voyeuristic. But instead, this book, like, was one of the first books I read that I feel like was like a really honest portrayal of being like a young teenage girl coming up in the world and like being incredibly sexualized and like in like trying to figure yourself out and like troublesome way that this world interacts with teen girls. It's goodness. It was very complicated, and I appreciate that this book didn't like overtly tell you exactly what to be thinking. Like it left a fair amount up to interpretation. It wasn't like, it's interesting to say, but I feel like it wasn't like prescriptive morally.
Yes.
Like it just like displayed the honest, ugly truth. It was tantalizing in some ways, but it was so balanced with like how weighty and like scary things feel. I don't know. It was so interesting. This is a book that just stayed with me and still stays with me. And this is a book that after I read it, I was like, what can top this year? It's like, this was really good.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I felt the same way. Like, what could top this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had to have some distance from reading after this book.
Yeah, no, me too.
Because
Yeah.
nothing could follow up.
Yeah, exactly. It was really good. I would, if you read one book off this list that we're talking about, this should be the one. It was really interesting.
Oh, yeah. I remember talking to you in the car, and we were talking
Yeah.
about the idea of how, like, Vanessa is, like, not, like, you're not meant to moralize her experience, because she also, like, challenges the idea of, like, what a perfect victim should be like or act like.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, she's messy and
Mm-hmm.
defensive and is at times hard to sympathize with, but is so
Yeah.
like so easy to empathize with. Like, and I think that's why the story feels so truthful, because you sit with her and how like she's both like discomforted and sitting in all this like ambiguity about like what actually happened to her, which makes it feel like you're there with her. Like, it's so intense,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also so powerful and memorable, and it made my skin crawl. It made me
Yeah. Yeah.
deeply uncomfortable, and yet I couldn't stop reading because
Mm-hmm.
she's such a heartbreakingly honest and truthful
Yeah.
character. I really liked the words you used to describe her because it's so true.
Yeah. Oh my God. You're so right that like at times she is so hard to to sympathize with. You're kind of like, what are you, like, why are you,
You're still
what,
seeing
like,
him. Like,
you're still seeing him, like, why are you, but then that's the thing, like, that's like the nature of like this type of abuse, and I just feel like it was so well written, like it wasn't like this bad thing happened and now like you have this perfect victim narrative where she knows it's bad and she wants this one very specific vision of justice. It's like everything but that. It's like complicated and convoluted and like just brutal at times. And I haven't read something that was able to be this like devastatingly, excruciatingly honest in a long time. And that to me is what literature is all about. So there's some controversy kind of around this book that I think is important for us to talk about, and we might do a future episode maybe exclusively about this book. So stay tuned for that. So we went from a real high and now we're starting to go down. So the next book is called Annie-Bot by Sierra Greer. I watched, what's that movie that came out about? Companion? Yes, it's called Companion. Okay. I watched this movie called Companion, and it's about kind of like a robot girlfriend, and I thought, oh, what an idea. And I wanted a bit more about that topic, so I read Annie-Bot, but I really didn't enjoy Annie-Bot. I thought there were parts of it that were really challenging for me to get with. But it's about a robot girlfriend, and it's all of the disgusting stuff that you can imagine that accompanies a robot girlfriend, And, it talks about like agency and freedom and like those types of things. And, I think that this is an interesting concept, but I don't think it was done in a way that I personally resonated with too much. There was some like stuff about race that I think could have been more interesting. Moving swiftly on, I did read a book by another white woman that I think was much better. That we talked really extensively about in one of our podcast episodes that you also read this year, which is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. More interesting commentary about race, gender, in this like sci-fi. Would you call Frankenstein sci-fi?
I think people consider Mary Shelley to be the mother of science fiction.
Well, there we go. So these are two sci-fi books I read. One of them substantially better than the other.
Yeah. And if you want to listen more or want to learn more about Frankenstein, tune into episode 3 of our monster miniseries.
There we go. You definitely should. I think I would have enjoyed that book less if we hadn't like really engaged with the work critically. I think that if I just read it and then closed the book, I wouldn't have gotten as much out of it. I liked that we really dove into it in a different way, and that made reading it much more enjoyable. And then the new movie also came out in 2025. Guillermo del Toro and is starring Jacob Elordi. I did watch that. And I'll just say I liked the book better.
Yeah. So. Absolutely. I don't think the film was like emotionally honest to the book.
No. There was there was like emotional truth to each character in the book that I felt like made a lot of sense in the world that she was writing. And every one of the characters in the movie adaptation, their emotional truth was changed pretty substantially. That was really hard for me to like then truly feel immersed in the movie. Though like Guillermo del Toro does good like atmosphere, costume, setting stuff, which I can appreciate. But the book was interesting though. I liked the book overall. I think that's one that sticks with you,
Okay, so the last book I wanted to talk about is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. First published in 2024, explosive debut novel that was really well received by a lot of different people and also by me too. So I'll read the Goodreads summary. Cyrus Shams is a young man grappling with an inheritance of violence and loss. His mother's plane was shot down over the skies of the Persian Gulf in a senseless accident, and his father's life in America was circumscribed by his work killing chickens at a farm factory in the Midwest. Cyrus is a drunk, an addict, and a poet whose obsession with martyrs leads him to examine the mysteries of his past towards an uncle who rode through Iranian battlefields dressed as the angel of death to inspire and comfort the dying, and toward his mother through a painting discovered in a Brooklyn art gallery that suggests she may not have been who or what she seemed. I really liked this novel. I contend, though, that the best parts of this novel are the chapters from everyone but Cyrus's point of view, even though his was very interesting too. I think going into this book, I was struggling with it a little bit, but it's because of its like surrealness. But it's so interesting, and there's a plot twist in there that I should have seen a mile away because of how much it like made sense and slotted in perfectly, but I still didn't see it coming. There's a review that I really like on Goodreads that kind of like capsizes how I feel about this novel, and it goes like, the prose, you can tell it's written by a poet, but the plot, you can tell it's written by a poet. I thought that was hilarious.
That's good. That's good.
You can really tell that a poet, like, this is a poet's debut like novel, and it's written in a way that's like lyrical and emotionally charged, but it's still accessible. So even when the book is dealing with like these very heavy ideas of like death and addiction and religion and politics, it still feels like digestible. It still feels very intimate. And you can see how like Cyrus's thoughts like spiral and contradictory, and he gets so messy like inside, and also like he pisses himself a lot uh,
Oh.
because of his like addiction and all these things. So, and the book does feel like very honest, but I think like harkening back to the title, the main character like Cyrus is obsessed with the idea of like martyrdom, not in a political or religious sense, but as a way of asking like what would make a life matter. And in my angsty moments, I often ask myself that question, and I'm sure that's not unique to me, so I feel like it resonated with a lot of like people who have read this book. So, in balancing that kind of seriousness with pain and with humor and with art, it treats like his craft. Cyrus is also like a writer, a poet in the novel. It treats his art and his trying to build like these human connections as like ways of grappling the question of what would make life matter. It's his way of like surviving life through all the hardships and messiness that he finds himself in. So yeah, very interesting book, deeply moving work. Can't wait to read more by Kaveh Akbar. I will say though that the last scene in this book was, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I'm still trying to make meaning out of it.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, that's also a book that if you saw the cover, you would know exactly what book this is. It was everywhere, a really bright yellow, interesting cover.
Oh yeah.
Um, hmm That's been on my TBR as well. Maybe I'll get around to that this year. This next book was I think a 2025 release actually. And it's called The Bewitching by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. And I read Mexican Gothic multiple years ago and really enjoyed it. I thought it was really a good book. And I haven't really read anything else by this author, even though she's quite a prolific writer. Nothing else has really captured my attention. But this book is about witches, so I thought, yeah, let me read it. We were doing that podcast episode about witches, so I thought, let me try. And it's also kind of a campus novel too. It kind of takes place on this New England campus, and there are these like overlapping stories, ghost stories, witch stories on the campus, and also the main character's own like heritage and, you know, kind of some interesting ideas that originally made me interested in the book. But it sort of fell a little flat for me. Like, there's a point where I felt that it was quite predictable. And I wonder if when you're such a prolific writer, like coming out with a book every year and a half, that sort of formulaic feel to plot structure just kind of like dissolves the magic a little bit for me reading. And the prose wasn't anything that I like fell into. So it was fine. Not the best, but fine. I think I gave it like a 2 stars. And then the last book I read, and this isn't the last book of the year, because I read graphic novels, I think, kind of towards the end of the year. But the last book I read is kind of strange because you would think that I've already read this book, but I hadn't. I hadn't. I read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, finally.
Oh my god, I remember you were talking about this book and I was like, wait, Soha, I could have sworn you read this when you were like 17 and in high school.
Right. Yeah. I think that I've had a copy of this book since I probably was 17 and in high school. Like I've owned this book for a very, very long time. I just never read it, which is so strange because I think that, you know, that's the book you read when you're that age, right? But I actually really enjoyed it. Even at this age, I really enjoyed it. I thought that the writing was really good, actually. I thought there were definitely some racist moments throughout the novel. That was a bit hard to contend with. But overall, this like ennui, this discontent, depression, this like young girl trying to move, you know, young woman trying to move through life, find out what she wants, like brushing up against like societal expectations and, you know, her own sort of like, you know, mental illness, maybe even. Like it was interesting to me. So I gave it a 4 star. But yeah, it's surprising that I hadn't read that until this last year. Kind of strange. But I liked it overall.
I feel like even if you haven't read it, if you were on Tumblr during a certain time period,
Yeah.
you definitely come across this.
Oh yeah. See, that's the thing. I basically had read this book. Because I was a youth online. So I had read this book. But yeah, no, it has a really interesting opening sentence which is like kind of, you know, captures people's attention. But anyways, it was good. But yeah, that's the last novel before I speedrun the graphic novel. So tell me about your last one.
So as previously mentioned, I get into these frenzies of like reading, and this last, what I will mention next, I had this really intense frenzy over the course of like 36 hours, maybe even less than, where I read like 4 books of a 6 series books, and it's none other than the Game Changer series by Rachel Reed. So I read 4 of the 6. I read Game Changer, Scott and Kip's book, Heated Rivalry, of course. I read I read Role Model, which is Troy and Harris's book, and then I read The Long Game, which is the second book of Ilya and Shane's romance. I have to preface this by saying that I've read so much romance, and I there's no way to like understate that I read and have read so much romance. I've been a romance lover since I was 9 years old, which is
Aw.
the age that I read Twilight.
Iconic.
I know.
Truly iconic. You should have a t-shirt that said I read Twilight at 9.
I know. That should be like a warning to everybody who comes near me. So I guess safe to say is I've consumed a lot of love stories, and like everybody else, I fell deeply, madly in love with the Heated Rivalry series on Crave and HBO. And I just thought this show was like such a perfect depiction of tenderness, of yearning and tension and intimacy. And I first came across this show. I'm prefacing with the show because that is what inspired me to start reading these books. So I first, like, Heated Rivalry first came on my radar in early October, November, when the teaser had dropped and it became super viral, and I eagerly waited for the first 2 episodes to drop in November, and I've been like hooked ever since. Like I'm in this phase of my life where so naturally I had to read the source material, and in that frenzy I read 4 of the 6 books during Thanksgiving weekend. And I just have to say, I think that it's a fun, emotional, and extremely tender series. I think more than anything, what the book series does is it nails the chemistry. Like, especially Shane and Ilya, like, their dynamic is built on this banter and this competitiveness and this explosive sexual tension, but it like slowly deepens into something softer and more meaningful. And I generally do not love watching a love story or relationship that starts out as like casual hookups that turn into something more than that. But this book was like, wow, of course it had to start that way. Like, it is so informed by these characters' lives that of course it had to start this way. And I think that both Shane and Ilya, I'm focusing on these two because they're like half of what I read and probably the most interesting of the series. Like, their flaws and insecurities and emotional walls, given their like careers and the pressure they face as professional athletes, I think that was handled very interestingly. It's not something I had encountered before. I can say that especially after reading The Long Game, I can say that there's a really interesting balancing of like angst and joy, and there's enough emotional tension to keep things really interesting. But like, more than that, it's like funny, it's sexy and comforting. And I think what I love about both the book and the series is that it feels like emotionally intense but safe at the same time. So it's something that you feel comfortable during like rewatching. Other shows I really have to like prepare myself before I rewatch, like Interview with the Vampire or Fellow Travelers or all of these other things. So I guess I'll summarize by saying I think the books are perfectly fine. But I think the show, it's like the books are fine, but the show is exceptional. And I think that Jacob Tierney's direction was like perfect as romance television can be. And I'm not gonna lie, it's like too close to me to really speak coherently or critically about it right now. But once I have a little bit more distance from both the show and the books, but mostly the show, I think I'll be able to look at it in like in a way that I'm not so attached to it, or that I'm not feeling so weird about it.
Yes. I have also been enjoying the show. I mean, who hasn't been, really? You know?
It's really pervaded.
Yeah.
It's not niche. It's like
It's mainstream now.
It's mainstream now.
Yeah. No, it's a fun time. It's a fun time. very insider sneak peek onto the production of our podcast. Jasmine and I were having a lot of technical difficulties while setting up recording today, and I pulled out a bowl of steaming hot pho, and we just talked about heated rivalry for a while. So, a little behind the scenes for you. But anyway, I have a couple graphic novels that I'm not going to spend too much time on. I'll just give you like a couple little words, each one. Speedrun. I read a graphic novel called Squad. Gay, werewolf, Bay Area, Asian writer. That's cool. But I gave it a 1 star.
Ooh.
Garlic and the Vampire and Garlic and the Witch. Garlic and the Vampire we talked about in a previous podcast episode. Super cute. That was one of my 5-star reads, actually. One of my 3 5-star reads this year. Garlic and the Witch. Cute. 3 stars. The Tea Dragon Society. Pretty cute. Queer. Cool. It was good. 3 stars. And then Pumpkinheads, because fall time. Queer-ish as well. Rainbow Rowell. 3 stars. Very fun. Yes, and then just a quick breakdown. I have some stats for you folks who like stats.
Ooh.
I read 13 novels. 6 of those novels are written by people of color, which actually is, I would say, less than I typically read by people of color. But I read 4 classics, which is more classics than I would typically read in a year. And that's probably also why I read not as many POC authors. And I think there's we can talk a little bit more in a future episode about canon and classics and what is considered a classic and like how whiteness is pervasive in that definition. But anyways, I read 5 graphic novels, 1 POC author, I believe. I had 3 5-star reads, and I read 18 books total. So that is effectively our reading recap of 2025. So I think overall a fun reading year. Like I think that I read some pretty memorable books this year, and so did you. So that feels really good. And let's spend maybe like 5 minutes or so talking about our 2026 goals, because I have very like my reading typically is just like whatever kind of comes to me is fine. You know, like I'm real loosey-goosey with it. But I have a couple loose kind of things that I can say about what I'd like to read. And you said that you have kind of a list of books you'd like to read. How many books are in your TBR for 2026?
I have. There's 4 books I know I want to hit. 4 books I.
Okay.
But then
yeah.
there's the section in my goals that's like a separate section, and I have just like a list. But 4 new books that I want to hit, number 1 is Hong Saman by Shirley Jackson.
There we go. Yes, I lent that to you when I
Yes.
recently visited.
I
Yeah.
know, it's on my
Lovely.
mantle, and I look at it and I feel like I need to read this. But
Yeah.
if you want to learn more about Hong Saman, listen to our last casual episode, because it is one of Soha's favorite books. And
Yeah, I really like that one.
yeah, there's a lot of reasons why I want to read this novel. Like, I like Shirley Jackson, I love Gothic literature, but most importantly, I want to read this novel because it's one of your favorites, and
Aw.
I feel like when I read a book that you really like, or when we do like buddy reads, I feel like really close to you.
Oh, that is so sweet.
And
I love that too. I love buddy reading with
I
you.
know. Our audience may not know this, but we're long distance producing. We're long distance friends, which is
Yeah.
entirely my fault. But see,
It's so funny.
but like, so suffice to say, is like I can't wait to finish it and return it and discuss it with Soha more than
Yeah. Aw.
anything.
I think that would be a lovely reading related goal this year, is to buddy read something together, because we did that in 2025 kind of naturally. I was reading My Dark Vanessa and I was like, oh my god, you got to read this book, and then you read it pretty shortly after, and then we just spent so long talking about it. So I consider that a type of buddy reading.
Mhm.
So I think that it'd be really cool to be able to do at least. Oh, and then we also did
And
Frankenstein,
we did
right, for our
Frankenstein.
episode.
Yeah.
So man, let's keep doing that in 2026. It's so much fun.
Absolutely. Okay. And then the next book that I know I definitely want to hit in the new year is called Hijab Butch Blues by Lamia
Yes.
H.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's for those who don't know, it's a memoir published in 2023. And I mean, wow, I try to read at least one lesbian memoir a year, and this one pulled my attention immediately. Like it's a South
Mm-hmm.
Asian Muslim woman who moves to a Gulf Arab country and moves to the United States, who's grappling with family and displacement, migration, sexuality, and community. That's right up my alley.
Right up our alley.
Yeah. That I definitely want to read. And then the last one I'll mention more in depth before I get other goal that I have is Tar Baby by Toni Morrison.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I love Toni Morrison and I'm on a quest to read more of her works. I mentioned earlier that I am a romance fiend and this novel feels like a case of my worlds colliding. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
so excited to experience a Toni Morrison love story. So we
Mm-hmm.
shall see.
I love that for you. Okay. I don't have specific books on my list. I just have like things, vibes. So I'll go over a couple of them.
Mhm.
Um, I'd like to read one nonfiction book this year.
Mm.
Um, Maybe not even a memoir, like something, maybe even a little academic. Like, I don't know. I haven't read a book like that in quite a while, so
Mhm.
we'll see if I get to that. Um, I'd like to I'd like to maybe go to an like a bookish event or like an author event at
Mhm.
like a local bookstore or something like that. I think that would be pretty fun. For those of you who don't know, I used to work at a bookstore and I used to like put on some of these types of events and it's just been so long since I've attended an event like that, like an author talk or like a something like that or like a book release party. So I saw that the local bookstore near me had this Jane Austen birthday thing a couple months ago. So that was so cool. So maybe something like that I'd like to do. And then something that I've been wanting to do is switch my tracking to Storyboard
Mm.
instead of Goodreads
Mhm. Honestly,
because
same.
that yeah, that's gonna be a tough one
Yeah.
just because I've been using Goodreads for so long. But that's one that I want to do because I think it's like Black woman owned, and I think that it's just like a. There's also like more things that you can do on Storyboard, I think. So yeah. Okay, Jasmine, what's your last book before I go into my sort of last little goal here?
So I'm claiming 2026 to be my year of the reread.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah,
unexpected.
I know.
Okay. That makes sense though for you.
I
Okay.
know. I was grappling with this for a long time. Actually, I had wanted to start this early last year, but I decided because it didn't happen last year, I need to make it happen this year. And I want to reread books in a self-reflective kind of way. It's a very strange time in my life. I feel like I'm really disconnected from who I am and who I used to be. I'm aging and I feel the crushing weight of the world more heavily than I ever have before. And I also have, like, in a lighter note, like, I have better critical tools to look at and investigate these texts. And I feel like, for a lot of these books, it's been so long since I read them that I can only remember, like, fleeting feelings and plot points about them. And in this reread, I'd like to catalog them and preserve them, which is something that I've been like historically resistant to do, hence all of the Goodreads summaries and all these things and whatever. But a case to reread, I think, would be all of the book to film or book to TV show adaptations coming out this year. Wuthering Heights,
Oh, yeah.
Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice. All books I've read before, but I need to reread to prepare for those.
Right.
And also, like, books that I've read that I want to reread, that I read in a time or environment that was maybe that wasn't conducive to the best reading experience, like Panine by Vladimir Nabokov. I read a majority of his work 6 years ago for a class, and the class was a bit of a sticky situation, so it's colored his entire what's the literary equivalent for discography? It's his entire works.
His entire works.
His entire works. I'm looking at it through that lens of that class, which I'd like to separate. The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I read this book also for a class 8 years ago, and maybe I can't even I've spent so long reading that book, but I can't even show anything for it because I barely remember what I was doing in that class. And also, it's kind of a way to like feed my own ego, I guess, because that's a whole separate conversation.
Well, that's a hefty book. That's a long one.
Yeah. The Hunger Games I'd like to revisit because it's been...
Oh my god, I know.
Books 1 through 3 in particular, because it's been almost 15 years since I picked up the first book. And I'd like to reconnect with that version of myself 15 years ago. And also, the world continues to feel quite dystopian, so maybe it's like appropriate. Hamlet by Shakespeare, because at this point it's an annual tradition. I mean, I like that it's become such a thorough point in my life that I've read this novel at these different times in my life. Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Revisiting a high school English class read. Oh my god. I remember feeling so strongly about Holden, and I think it was the teenage angst, and I need to know if I will feel similarly. I don't know. That's why I will want to reread it. And then lastly, the last book that I really want to reread is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton.
Oh my, I have such a relationship with that book. I've read it so many times.
Right? Right. And this was the middle school book that got me to engage critically in literature. And I think I was like 12 or 13 when it was assigned to us. I need to know if it holds up. Does it hold the weight of my English degree? Because that is such like a butterfly effect. Like, if I didn't read this book, would I have all these things? Does it hold? Like, we'll see if it holds.
Wow. The year of the reread. That is so... I love that. Well, I think my last 2026 reading goal is somewhat linked to this one. Not in that I'm going to reread books, because I'm not a huge rereader. When I just said I read The Outsider so many times, that was as a kid. I like read it over and over again. But as an adult, I haven't done a lot of rereading. That's not a big part of my reading experience. But I do think that there are a number of classics that I have just sort of like missed somehow through my life. Like there's a fair amount of books that I just haven't read, like weren't assigned to me in classes. And for many years in my adult life, I had this thing where I didn't read any white authors.
So valid.
I was just like, nope, not gonna do that. And I only was reading people of color, which was really cool, and I really loved that. And I hope that like this upcoming year, a substantial amount of the books I read will still be by authors of color, and hopefully authors of color who also wrote classics. Like, that is extraordinarily interesting to me. But yeah, my reading goal is to read more classics this year. So a lot of the books that you mentioned are sort of on my TBR, like Wuthering Heights. I do want to read that this year. I've never read it cover to cover, And that's something I really want to do in preparation for the film. But yeah, that sort of wraps up our 2026 reading goals, I suppose. And I guess we'll check in at the end of this year and see how many of these we were able to accomplish. But thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Critical Edition podcast. We're so excited to have this full reading year with you all to talk about bookish things. And we will see you in the next one. Bye.